Hi, hello there, ladies. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of your circle and presenting here some of my material. Thank you, Carla, for inviting me. I know you've been having a circle, a book club for women who run with the wolves, and I find that this topic that Carla and I chose is very much connected, of course, with the themes that are in there. And it sounds so good to be all there together. I would love to be there with you ladies and enjoying some tea, some wine. I don't know what you're having, and chatting it up. I love sisterhood and I love that connection, and I hope that you're all enjoying. So the topic that we're going to be discussing, and I've told Carla I'm presenting this, and then you're welcome to contact me with any questions. We can maybe have a Q&A. We'll see how it goes. But it's about the importance of bringing in our intellect into our sensuality. And the way that I see this is that it's like historically women have been kept from the intellect, from schooling, for a long period in our history. So we're kept from voting, we were relegated to the home with the children. It was even in some places forbidden for women to get together and talk about politics. And it's been part of the women's struggle to get, we had the salons of the past 2 centuries, like the salons in the 1800s, where women would come together and finally discuss politics, which eventually led to us getting suffrage again. That means we were able to vote again. So claiming our intellect, I see it as a way of taking our power back. Now, the thing is that it doesn't have to be in a masculine way. It doesn't have to mean, oh, now you're a historian, and now you must learn about wars and history and dates and dinosaurs, memorize stuff. No, the invitation I'm making tonight is actually about a feminine path of listening to our bodies, our dreams, following the symbols within our dreams and unconscious, researching them, following our curiosity, interacting with the world and the universe that we're a part of. What is she trying to communicate to us, to me in particular? What message do I have to bring forth? Let me take a note here. So this path of weaving our intellect with our families, with our children, with our home, with our relationships, our inner world, our outer world, is about alignment and synchronicity. It's a world that brings us back in connection to the world of excitement and adventure that we were on as young girls. So to develop that a little bit further, a lot of the knowledge that we were taught when we were little was a lot about brain, mind, memorizing facts. It may have even felt boring and off in some way, but we were good girls for the most part and memorized, right? As we shift into a more feminine way of being in life, we tune into our body and our body wisdom. This process within the larger collective can be facilitated and encouraged when we find or we connect with with not only a lot of people call herstory. So herstory as in history, but coming from a feminine perspective. Herstory, so not all wars, not battles, kings, but also what were families like? What about the arts, and what is my way of viewing the world, spirituality, my cosmovision, the arts, dance, healing arts, the moon, the stars, the cycles. So connecting to knowledge that supports rather than suppresses the growing wisdom within ourselves is coming into a balance within ourselves, nourishing ourselves. So coming into touch with that kind of intellect should feel nourishing. It should feel satisfying rather than draining. And it's important that the body and the intellect that I'm talking about, that it's more I would call it more even wisdom, coming in touch with wisdom and bringing that into our bodies, connecting it with our emotions, our feelings, our unconscious, just on all levels. So it kind of verifies also the internal shifts that we're going through. So the kind of wisdom that I'm talking about will validate and verify that which I'm intuiting inside is real. It should be in tune with our intuitions and our own bodily wisdom and knowing. So for example, when I first started to connect with this kind of knowledge that I'm talking about, it was very different from anything I had ever learned about. Just to share a little bit of my own history, I grew up I'm originally from Mexico, and I learned, I studied in San Diego. I went to high school and everything in San Diego. And then I went on I was a dancer, and I was very good at academics, and I was encouraged to go to college at a very fancy university. I wanted to go to a more art space, and I went to Columbia University, which some of you may know, have heard of. It's an Ivy League school, so it's very competitive. And I got in there, so my dad, everyone encouraged me to go there. And it was one of those decisions in which I'm telling you this thing of, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more, but based on me pleasing the outside world. So extrinsic learning. And then I moved back to Mexico City. And in Mexico, I was offered a position as a professor at the Ibero in Mexico City. And I had studied anthropology, so I was asked to teach an anthropology course on the history of agriculture in Mexico from pre-Hispanic times to the present. My God, I had no idea about this, right? So being someone who really wanted to offer something really good and of value, I studied like 3 or 4 months. And I came out of that changed, because I really understood that indigenous wisdom, it challenged everything I'd learned. It was so wise. Indigenous had been able to support over 20 million people in Mexico before the Spaniards arrived, and then kind of ruined all of that with their metal instruments. And why was this so important? Because the indigenous really looked at the kind of soil they had and the kind of environment, and really worked with it, right? And when the Spaniards came, it was like they just implemented their own wisdom and knowledge from their land, but they didn't look at the land in Mexico, and they just imposed that, and it caused a lot of erosion, and it led to the downfall of Mexican agriculture. Anyway, this is not about Mexican agriculture, but the point was that it opened my eyes to how there were other ways of viewing the world that were completely unlike anything I had ever learned about growing up. And I began to question, well, maybe there's other ways to look at everything. Like maybe there's a way to look at how I look at life and how I do things and what I believe in. And did it have the potential to change my life? Yes, it did. I started investigating. I followed my curiosity. And see, one of the main things about education and the way we were taught when we were young, for the most part, is that it is extremely externally motivated. That means we're rewarded like Pavlov's dogs when we get good grades, when we pass a test, and that means our learning is based on pleasing others. The opposite of that, what I'm talking about here, is intrinsically motivated learning, which is actually the basis of this thing called unschooling, based on the premise that we must unschool ourselves of all the habits and stuff that we've learned from the past, and rather become intrinsically motivated again. That is, that we must start to follow our natural curiosity and interest from within. The premise of that is that if you have kids, or if you've watched children, you'll see it's true. We're naturally very motivated learners, curious, interested in life. The thing is to trust that natural instinct and desire to learn, to feed it, and to continue allowing it to blossom, rather than squashing it and then force feeding a bunch of learning, which many teenagers end up resenting and rejecting. You can see this general pattern based on the stereotypes of the reluctant student, the kid who ditches school, bored. You can also see this in the overwhelming occurrence of ADHD and other learning disabilities. We limit teaching and learning to the classroom rather than opening up life to be our laboratory and trusting ourselves to be naturally led to what it is that we're meant to develop and really learn from and grow ourselves. So when we access this feminine-based wisdom, it is often based in story, symbolic language, and it includes body-based wisdom and practices. It should feel good in your body. Intuitions and even art, music, nature, and more. It's like a spiral. It doesn't have an outcome, like it's not about passing a test or getting a degree. It's not linear. It's more of a spiral in which it touches you inside, like something inside of you shifts and grows, and then you have something to share with the world outside. You have a message to give. It's not meant to impose some learning which you then memorize and then regurgitate, but rather awaken something within you, which is actually the true meaning of educate, which comes from educare, or in Latin, or draw forth, educare, or draw forth. So we're drawing something forth. Okay, so femininity is a body-based practice, and our individual home is our body, and the larger body or home is the earth, and in a wider context, the universe. So the indigenous were wise because they based their wisdom or their intellectual studies on listening to the universe, listening, receptivity, a feminine state. Then they created calendars like the Mayan calendars based on that rather than imposing their own ideas onto nature. So we marry our feminine and our masculine sides, our yin and our yang, through pursuing intellectual activities that not only include but tie in our body, making our intellect part of our sensuality. So I hope that is helpful. I wanted to maybe give you some examples of very beautiful things that I've found along my journey that I've found kind of life-altering. So methodologies. Sometimes I know a lot of us have resistances and kind of hate even the word research because it's like, oh my God, I don't want to sit in a library that's quiet and do bibliographies and citations and quotations, and it's just terrible. But actually, there are some methodologies that have come up recently in the more recent years that are actually really exciting. So one of them I found out about, I did some graduate studies at it was called the New College of California. It's now closed, but it's in San Francisco. It was in San Francisco, and it had all of them, a very large number of awesome feminist teachers. Vicki Noble, Louisa Tage, Judy Grant were all teachers there. And one of the most amazing things I learned there was about this research methodology called organic inquiry. So it treats research as sacred. It actually invites you to start with a question you may have in your own personal life. Let's just take an example like, how can I raise my children in a way that feels very aligned with my values? Something like that. So I might start to journal. Journaling is a great way to tune into that intellectual space. And I offer it almost like it's like where research, as I was saying, is sacred. So it's the crossroads of research as a prayer. Like you are asking of the universe to respond to you. And I know this may sound really woo-woo for some of you, but go with me here for a second. And in fact, there's now so many books written about all this that you can even find how very scientific viewers, people who are really intellectual based and very scientific, really do recognize that things, the world responds to our intention. So when we have an intention of asking a question, you may already feel the answer, like it's already birthing the answer from within you. So when we ask a question from the universe, we could say that the answer wants to give itself to us. So the task of research then becomes this sacred, it is like a prayer of like, okay, so I hold this question, I write it down, I pray, I sit with it, and then I allow the answer to come. I allow, and it may not come all at once. That's kind of part of the beauty of the process. So then, okay, I get some synchronicities, I get some messages, and we all know what that feels like. As much as we may resist the woo-woo, you've had that moment where you're really thinking about a friend and she calls you right then. Or, you're thinking about an ex-boyfriend and you run into his mom at the supermarket, and it's like you can see how synchronicity works. And if you want further proof, you can read Einstein's theory of like physics, how there's really nothing solid in the universe. And we can do a whole nother talk if you want, Carla, on why this produces so much fear in us as a society and like how we, why we kind of resist that. But right now I'm just going to go with it here. So the process of allowing the answers to come to us, we write them down, and then we may have further questions, right? So like we get some answers, we let those sink in, and then we have more questions. And it's a dance, and it's an organic inquiry. The analogy that organic inquiry makes is that it's like growing a plant. So the question is like a seed that I plant, and then I have to water it. Like I might read some books about the subject that I'm interested in, and then I start, watching for signs. Oh, I see something popping up over here. Let me water that over here. Let me nurture and tend to this inquiry. And then it kind of grows into something that I never would have expected. And yes, so this was the process that I have followed, something similar to that in my own writing of my master's thesis, in which I incorporated dance and bibliography and hermeneutics, so studying books to answer my questions. And I ended up being about women healing ourselves through mothering ourselves and using expressive arts as well. So, okay, so going on, so the methodologies there are organic inquiry and alchemical hermeneutics is another one. Then another characteristic or thing that I've found in this kind of intellectual sensuality is body-based practices of acquiring information, like somatics, doing somatic-based practices. Another is learning about goddess cultures. Marija Gimbutas is amazing. Looking into the origin of words, studying the calendars like the moon cycles, moon calendars, menstruation, and anything pretty much about women's history. Reading feminine authors, Marianne Wideman, Marija Gimbutas, and many more, like the ones you're reading right now with Clarissa Pinkola-Estes, and there's so many, right? Psychology, I find the themes of psychology, especially like feminine psychology and depth psychology. Psyche is soul, so that's basically the study of soul. So I find that to hold a lot of interesting things. Indigenous wisdom, earth-based wisdom, permaculture, gardening, astronomy, moon cycles, the calendars. Anyway, there's a lot, and I am really excited for your journey of research, and please let me know how it goes, and let me know if you have any questions that I can answer. And you can always, I have a website called Tanya, Tanya, Dantus, Dantus.com, and I do coaching with people, individual, and I also facilitate retreats and group programs. Right now I'm guiding women through a 13-month cycle, so it's like a year-long cycle of stepping up into our leadership, and I will be renewing that and starting a new group at the end of July. And I'm leading a retreat to a sacred Mayan site called Palenque in Chiapas in September. And I do other things. So you can check out my website, tanyadantus.com. I have a blog. Feel free to check that out, some interesting articles. And I also run a Facebook group called the Feminine Empowerment Lounge. So it's free. You're welcome to check that out too. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to write me, you can write me at tanya@tanyadantus.com or get in touch with me through Carla. Pleasure. Ciao.